This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Hello, I'm Renée Stein, Chief Conservator of the Michael C. Carlos Museum.
And I'm Katie Etre, the Assistant Conservator. We are pleased to introduce you to our profession and will describe examples of our work in the Parsons Conservation Laboratory.
Conservation is the profession devoted to the preservation of cultural property for the future. Our professional organization is the American Institute for Conservation of Historic and Artistic Works. The cultural property we care for can take a wide variety of forms. Ancient monuments like the pyramids in Egypt, masterpieces of art like Vermeer's painting, The Girl with a Pearl Earring, national symbols like the Statue of Liberty, ethnographic objects like this North American Indian feather headdress, local history like the image of Civil War generals carved on the side of Georgia's Stone Mountain, objects of pop culture like Kermit the Frog, and even personal items like family photographs are all examples of cultural property. Skilled people have repaired valued objects throughout history. Today, most conservation professionals hold a master's degree and specialize in a particular area, such as paper, textiles, or paintings. We are both objects conservators. In order to prepare for graduate education, students of conservation study both the arts and sciences. It might surprise you to know that conservators study chemistry and biology, as well as art history and drawing. Practical experience in a conservation lab is also required, and generally accomplished through internships, fellowships, and volunteer work.
So what does the conservator do? Conservators are responsible for documentation, research, preventive care, and treatment of the objects in their care. Conservators use photographs, drawings, and written reports to document the condition of objects, carefully noting observations about past repairs and damage. We also document our work on objects, recording the steps and materials used for treatment.
When examining an object and preparing for its treatment and long-term care, conservators often conduct research. This research may identify materials, explain manufacturing techniques, assess condition, describe deterioration mechanisms, determine age, provenance, or authenticity, or test materials and methods for conservation. We examine objects under different types of light to distinguish and sometimes identify materials. Under ultraviolet light, the varnish on this ancient Egyptian coffin is visible as bright vertical brushstrokes. With exposure to infrared illumination, the pigment Egyptian blue displays a characteristic luminescence, or glow. We may also identify materials by using analytical techniques, including various types of microscopy, spectroscopy, or chromatography. Sometimes it is necessary to remove very tiny samples, but whenever possible, analysis is conducted directly on the object surface, without causing damage or alteration.
Often, insight into the materials and methods of construction will provide clues about the age, origin, and authenticity of an object. Although the limestone head on the left is ancient, the pigments in the decorative paint are modern, indicating that the object was recently repainted. The CT image of a mummy's skull reveals that the brain was not removed during mummification, as is generally understood to be common practice. The fact that this body was not thoroughly prepared for burial may indicate her status or provide information about changing mummification practices. Ancient artists and craftsmen rarely left specific records about how they created objects, so sometimes we design experiments and attempt to reproduce unknown manufacturing techniques, such as the creation of the unusual purple slip on pots from ancient Panama. On the left are 2 Panamanian pots in the Carlos Museum's collection. Tiles on the right were created to test the materials and firing conditions needed to produce the purple color. In order to assess the condition of objects, we may use techniques like magnification and radiography. Looking through a microscope can help us see tiny flakes of lifting paint that may require treatment. An X-ray can show the locations of metal pins inside a marble sculpture and reveal whether they are stable. Another purpose of our research may be to describe deterioration mechanisms. In order to treat and prevent damage and decay, we need to understand its causes. Paper becomes brittle and discolored when it is exposed to acid from the environment, from framing materials, or even from the paper itself. The acids break up the long glucose chains that form paper fibers, weakening and staining the paper. We also test the materials and methods we plan to use for storage, treatment, and display. We want to be sure that the objects will not be harmed by the materials they come in contact with, such as the fabrics used in exhibit cases. We also need to understand how materials interact, so we can make the best choices for each particular situation, such as selecting the right colorants for a fill or the best solvent for a solution.
Conservators want to prevent future damage by providing the best long-term care possible for objects. This preventive care involves controlling certain environmental factors, as well as establishing procedures and guidelines to protect objects safely. The environmental conditions addressed in preventive care are sometimes called agents of deterioration. They include light, temperature, relative humidity, pests, pollution, storage, disasters, and access or handling. These factors are very interrelated and can have dramatic impacts on the long-term well-being of objects and collections. Uncontrolled light exposure can lead to discoloration, as seen in the varnished areas of this partially cleaned landscape painting. Perhaps more familiar to us, light can also cause fading and color loss. The purple fabric in this appliqued textile now appears gray, except where it was hidden within seams. Temperature and relative humidity are closely related. As we know from the way our hair changes with the weather, organic materials like the paper in books are very responsive to changes in temperature and relative humidity. As we experience in hot, damp southern summers, mold can grow in elevated conditions of temperature and relative humidity, seen here forming a fuzzy haze on the colorful beadwork. Metal objects also readily corrode in hot, humid environments, forming the bright green, unstable areas seen among the drapery on this bronze statue.
Routine maintenance procedures like regular cleaning and monitoring for pests can help prevent damage from dust and insects. The best way to limit damage from a disaster is to be prepared, such as by having supplies on hand and plans in place so staff are ready to respond. Preventive care also includes providing protection for objects during storage, shipping, and display. It is equally important to promote safe access to objects by handling them properly and choosing storage or display methods that enable safe examination.
Over their lifetimes, objects may become damaged and require treatment. This treatment can include a variety of actions, such as stabilization, reshaping, cleaning, structural repair, loss compensation, or fabrication of missing parts. When this Egyptian mummy entered the Carlos collection, its wrappings were a mess. Ancient tomb robbers or curious modern owners may have partially unwrapped the layers to look for jewelry. The linen wrappings were humidified to make them more flexible and relax wrinkles, like you might hang a shirt in the bathroom to absorb steam from the shower. The wrappings were then gently coaxed back into position over the body. A sheer nylon covering was then wrapped around the mummy to stabilize or hold the layers in place, sort of like a hairnet. Finally, the mummy was placed onto a contoured board to support the fragile body during lifting. Sometimes the dirt and accumulated materials on the surface of an object can provide clues about its history. But sometimes objects are just dirty. When it is appropriate and safe to do so, we carefully clean away the dirt without damaging the original materials beneath. Conservators don't reach for Mr. Clean or call upon the power of lemon-scented Ajax. Instead, we custom formulate cleaning solutions to remove the specific grime without affecting the surface of the object.
Sometimes objects break and come into the lab in many pieces, including quite small ones. The fragments of this tripod vessel were reassembled, making it possible for us to understand the form and interpret its decoration. We choose adhesives that are just strong enough to hold the pieces together without causing damage to the object. Conservators use adhesives that have good aging properties, meaning they will not discolor, shrink, or become weak over time. When objects break, pieces may be lost, causing weak areas in the structure. The jaw of this buffalo mask had been broken and repaired numerous times. The missing area was recreated with paper pulp and foam, painted to simulate the aged wooden surface. Upon close examination, the repair can be distinguished from the original mask and can be easily taken off. Recognizable and reversible repairs are central to a conservator's approach. Sometimes losses can be visually distracting, and it is necessary to replace the missing parts. When this coffin lid was purchased, the inlaid bronze and limestone eyes were missing. A new set of eyes and eyebrows were fabricated to fit the carved channels in the wood. Ancient examples still exist and served as models for the replacement eyes. In order to make it obvious that these replacement eyes are not ancient, they were formed from modern materials including epoxy putty and acrylic paint. These materials can be easily recognized through careful examination.
The work of conservators supports the missions of cultural institutions like the Carlos Museum that collect, preserve, exhibit, and interpret works of art and artifacts. We are proud to be part of that effort.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.